So now that we have our array created, and we've done that over here, we're going to move on to actually making elements from that. So I'm going to turn off the points by coordinate right away, so those disappear. And we still have that array there, we're just not seeing it, obviously. And we have two different ways that I've created here for you to experiment with outputting that idea of brightness laid out over an array. One I call it dots, and the other one is surfaces and panels. And we're going to look first at dots. And actually what you should do is just think about, forget about the logic switch and the surface panels for now, and just concentrate on the idea of what this idea of dot creation is. And what's going on here is the key element here is a circle by center point radius. So what we're doing is we're taking a center point, which if you follow back, if I move this over, you'll see the wire. It's an output from this Boolean switch, but really ultimately what it is it is an output by the points by coordinate. So I could take this line, connect it right to the center point here. I've put in this logic switch just to give us, as you notice, the points are tracking into the logic switch and then come out of it. I probably should address the idea of what's happening with the logic switch right away. And the idea is that it's a Boolean switch, and you actually have to import that into packages. So you have to search the logic switch for that term, and you'll be able to import it. And you don't really need it. It doesn't need to exist. You can deal with these two and just wire them as you want to use them. But the idea with the switches is that by turning this on true, that allows the dots to function. By turning this one on true, it allows the surface and panels to function. And it does that by saying, I'm going to have a true or an on and off switch Boolean input, and whatever comes into that input, if it's true, comes out of it, and if it's false, nothing comes out of it. So these come out as null data. And that's just a way to turn or activate one function on over the other. And there's other ways to do that, but that's just a way that I approach that. So anyway, I'm sorry to overlay two concepts, but let's go back to the dots now and look at what we have here. So we're feeding those center points in, and if I was to turn this on right away, let's go to preview. We're now seeing outlines of circles, and their circles is the radius of the circle is being controlled by the brightness. So if you notice, there's a direct link between the brightness feeding into a code block. And let me explain a little bit about what's going on with the code block. The code block, first of all, the number slider allows me to multiply what's ever happening in X, which is a control over the radius. So if I was to go ahead, I would really actually rename this. So I'm going to go ahead and rename this node dot diameter. Dot radius, excuse me. Okay, so I've created a code block that allows me to take the brightness, multiply it by the dot radius, which is y1 right now, and then I add this 0.1. And the idea there is that sometimes the brightness comes out as 0, and if you have a 0 radius, you'll have nothing there, so there'll be nothing at all. And we really want to indicate this kind of idea of a point. You may not, you may want it transparent, but that's just another, that's the reason why this 0.1 is, to always guarantee there's some circle showing. And then the vector is just telling it which way the surface is created around that point. So we take that, and I'll turn the preview off for that now. And we'll turn on the surface by patch. And now we have dots that are just gray shapes without, and they're just flat planar surfaces. I'll turn those off. And we'll turn on what is ultimately the surface. And now we get the visualization of it having thickness to it. And the slider is dot depth. So I'll just rename that. If I can. So in the case of it being called dot depth, it also could be at we could leave this surface thicken off completely, and surface by patch would be an output file for just giving us a dot pattern on glass, maybe as a fit pattern. Anyway, that outlines just basically how we get to the dots. And the other element then is to output it to Revit so that we can visualize it. And in this case, this is a very familiar, or should become more familiar with it. The direct shape by geometry allows us to output that solid. I'm calling it a generic model, and I'm giving it a metal term, but that's really up to whatever your intentions are with that. So let's see if we have, so if we go back now into Revit, we get a visualization of that surface on there. So I'm going to go ahead and end this clip again, and then we'll go back to what's happening in the next clip about the idea of making surfaces and panels.